Today, on One Step Over the Line, we have another episode with Stephen Kalish, one of the largest marijuana smugglers in U.S. history, bringing in over 1 million pounds, and while living in Panama, laundering money for the Medellin cartel to $50, $100 million a week. His stories are incredible. His life is incredible. Stay tuned for another episode of One Step Over the Line. Next. Alrighty, another episode of One Step Over the Line with another of the marijuana mercenary episodes. Today again is Steve Kalish, and we're going to go over more stories from his phenomenal book, The Last Gentleman Smuggler. And I'll tell you right now, there's been other gentleman smugglers. Most of us in those days were gentlemen. But this man is a gentleman. To know him today and to know more about his story than y'all will know until we finish this whole 4-part series, you'll find out what a gentleman he really is. Steve, take it away.
Well, thanks for having me, Ken. We'll pick up where I think we left off in the last episode. I had just been introduced to Panama. I had brought in $3 million to see what it would be like. I had opened up my numbered accounts and acquired shell corporations. And I was offered opportunity to buy part of my Cesar Rodriguez's and Enrique Pretel's company that was called Servicios Turísticos de Panama. And that company received 10% of all the profits on any government contracts being issued for the purchases of multiple things. Anything the government or the Panamanian Defense Forces needed was funneled through that company, and they received a 10% commission off the top. So they asked me if I would be interested in buying a 25% share in their company. I said, let me look at your books. I looked at their books, and they said, okay, how much? They said $400,000. So I paid them $400,000, and well, prior to paying them $400,000, they said I had to meet their silent partner, and I said, well, who's your silent partner? They said General Noriega, and I asked who General Noriega was.
Yeah,
because I wasn't up at the time I flew to Panama. I didn't know who was running the country at the time.
Yeah.
Because
what year was that? Do you remember?
1983.
So was that still early in the game for Noriega, or was he firmly
early in the game for Noriega?
He wasn't the iron-fisted leader that he
No.
And when did the American government go in there, attack Panama, and take him down?
1989, I believe.
So he had a good run.
Yeah, he did. And made a lot of money.
Yeah.
No doubt. So anyway, they tell me they have a silent partner who I need to meet first and get his seal of approval. And I said, well, who is that? And they informed me it's the leader of the Panamanian Defense Forces, General Noriega, which gave me pause. I was not accustomed to paying off military personnel, and it was just through my past experiences. I didn't like paying off military. Didn't trust them. But I said, okay. And they said, well, you should probably take him some sort of gift that reflects your intention of living in Panama and what you want to do in Panama. And I asked, well, what sort of gift? And they said, well, obviously it's money, but we'll leave it up to you to determine how much. So I had just bought a Halliburton had just come out with a new thin-sized Halliburton briefcase.
I had one, the thin one, because I wasn't as rich as you. I had to get the small one, not the big one.
I wanted the small one.
Yeah.
I wanted the thin, gold, small one.
Yeah, I had the stainless or the silver one.
Anyway, so I put $300,000 in cash in it, and we went over to General Noriega's house. Me at a ranch-style villa in the San Francisco district of Panama, and it was 10 minutes away. So we went in, and I explained what I wanted to do in Panama, and I had an interpreter. He understood English fairly well, and my Spanish was nominal. I mean, I spoke Spanish, but anyway, we had an interpreter. Cesar did most of the interpreting. And by explaining to Noriega, I was looking for a place to live peacefully out of the scrutiny of the U.S. government. I had quite a bit of money I wanted to bring to Panama safely without the scrutiny of the U.S. government. I knew there were Democratic elections scheduled in 1984, and I wanted to live in a democracy, and I felt very strongly about that. And he agreed. He said the elections were scheduled, and we would love to have you, and everything you've said makes ultimate sense, and we'll take care of you. Anything you need, you can work through Cesar Rodriguez or Enrique Pretel. And it was a short meeting, maybe 45 minutes, an hour. And I had left my briefcase in front of his desk, to the side of his desk. And we all got up, we shook hands. We got up to leave. And he said, "Brown, you're leaving your briefcase?" And I said, "No." I told him in Spanish it was a gift for him. So we left. And a couple hours, that's probably 3 p.m. A couple hours later, we get a call, and Noriega has invited us to a party at the Panama Canal offices and insist on me being there, which is not something I would commonly do.
Right. I know.
To go meet all the high-ranking colonels in the Panamanian Defense Forces and all the all the prominent businessmen in Panama. And I had an assortment of beautiful women,
Well, is it
So
because you want to, not to interrupt, because you like to normally stay below the radar, kind of? Somebody once told me,
primarily.
in our business, one of my first mentors told me, he said, "Listen, kid, in our business, fame's a bummer. Stay below the radar."
And that was my MO as well.
And by the way, just so the listener knows, Brown was your alias.
I had a U.S. passport under the name of Frank William Brown, and Noriega liked to call me Brown. Everybody else called me Skip.
Yeah.
Skip was just a name I'd used for years.
Good.
So anyway, I went to the party, and I was met at the door by Noriega, and he embraced me in a bear hug. I could tell he was fairly inebriated and on his way to being drunk. And he drug me around that party, introduced me to all the prominent colonels and some of the businessmen, and also to some of the very beautiful women. And I had a couple of drinks, and then he drugged me over to his office, opened the door, took me to his desk, pulled out the chair, told me to have a seat and watch the ships transit the canal. And once I finished with that, he would to please come join the party again. It was a cocktail party. It wasn't a fashion party, right?
Hold on. I want to just tell you something. One time we were doing a trip out of Panama, and I flew down there, to hang out for a couple of days. And so you and I know the runnings down there. It's pretty loose. But I literally sat on the steps of the canal and just with my smuggling buddy, Ronnie Vest, and just watched the ships. And it takes 24 hours. So after like 40 minutes, Ronnie goes, "Let's go." I go, "No, I'm watching." He goes, "Kenny, nothing really happens." Just so people know, you can watch the canal. It's just, it takes 24 hours for the transition, I believe it is.
Well, it's because they're transitioning between different locks.
Yeah, exactly.
Which raise and lower the
Yeah,
ships.
exactly.
So the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans are at different levels. But when I was sitting at his office, there was a picture window overlooking the Panama Canal, and I could see a ship transiting one of the locks.
Yeah.
So as I was doing that, I looked over at Jorge Martinez, who was one of the Cuban Americans who had brought me down there. And I looked at him and I said, you know, did you have any idea we were going to be brought to, you know, meet people of this caliber? He said, no, I had no idea. But you've obviously met anybody and everybody who's important in Panama. And I said, it looks that way. So I broke out. I had a vial of, you know, Bolivian flake cocaine.
Yeah.
And I broke out a vial, made some lines on Noriega's desk, and snorted a couple of lines. He snorted a couple of lines. And I sat back and I thought about it.
Noriega snorted the lines?
No, Noriega had left me in his office alone and told me to rejoin the party when I got ready.
Oh.
So I snorted lines with Jorge Martinez and myself. And I said, you know, I wrote a book report in the 5th grade about the Panama Canal. And it's, you know, it's funny now when I look back on that book report I wrote about the building of the Panama Canal, because it was quite an endeavor.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, Jorge Martinez goes, let me go get that chica. Let me go get that woman that you were so fondly attracted to, who was this beautiful Panamanian, blue-eyed, gorgeous,
dark skin,
hair down to her. I mean, just gorgeous. So he went and got her, brought her back. We made love in Panama in Noriega's office. And when we finished, you know, she didn't do any cocaine. When we finished, we went back and joined the party. And I socialized with some of the other businessmen and a couple of the colonels who were important to know because they wrote the checks for the things I was going to do at Panama. So that was my introduction to Noriega. And we became close friends after that, did many things together, traveled together. I bought him a helicopter. I bought him a jet. Jet Bell Ranger, the helicopter. I bought him it was a couple million, yeah.
So what kind of, you know, and those are people might be watching, maybe they're younger, maybe they're older, you know, I know that Noriega finished it, you know, lived his life in MCC Miami. At the end, the government put him in Miami at the, you know, MCC Miami, the federal prison. Yeah. But what kind of man was he? You got to know him pretty good because, you know, for someone like me, we only see what we see, the average American like me, not someone like you, is pictures of him with his uniform on in Panama. Of course, then the American government, kind of similar to what they did to Maduro, raiding, attacking, taking him out. What kind of man was he?
Well, when I met him, he was friendly, jolly, comfortable in his position, ruthless in the regard that to be the leader of the Panamanian Defense Forces and former head of military intelligence, you had to be somewhat ruthless. Yeah. And I never underestimated Noriega. I didn't take him to be a killer. I was not told of any stories of him killing anybody. A lot of Americans picture him as a madman with a machete, screaming at the U.S., you know, after they abandoned him.
Yeah.
But when I knew him, he was nothing like that. I mean, you know, my trips with Noriega were to see Panama, flying in the helicopter and going to his ranches and bringing my future wife with me. And, you know, they were all great. I did a lot of favors for him. I made a lot of money with him through government contracts. I fell in love with Panama. Yeah. Panama was my new home. And I moved basically moved my operations to Panama, brought a couple of my key personnel to Panama who also loved it.
Yeah.
I mean, I lived an extravagant lifestyle. I had a Olympic-sized swimming pool, bought a mansion, had servants and chefs and everything a man could possibly want. I was lacking for nothing.
Well,
And
I have to ask you. I mean, this is such a deep story. I don't mean to interrupt, which I know I do, but I'm just so fascinated by this because to us, the people like me that grew up in this era, it's the mystique, like you said, and we know that he worked with the CIA. I wonder do you know how he actually got all that power? I mean, really ran. But I mean, it was a democracy, but he was kind of the dictator. Would you say he was a kind of a dictator inside a democracy, or he just had his lane, or he just had his lane?
It wasn't a democracy. No, Omar Torrijos had seized power, and it was a military dictatorship.
Okay, so it was what it appeared to be.
Omar Torrijos died in a plane crash, and then another colonel took over him, who had planned on running in the presidential elections in 1984. Noriega had different ideas about who should be their candidate, but Noriega was in charge of G2 military intelligence, so he had the goods on everybody.
Right.
So, and he'd been on the CIA payroll since the 70s.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, he had been. Yeah, but unbeknownst to most in Panama, he had been working with the CIA, and this is all documented.
No, I know.
What?
I didn't know he went back that far from the 70s. I guess because he was intelligence. Yeah, and interesting.
And we own the canal.
Oh,
we
that's
gave the
right.
canal back.
Yeah.
Signed the Panama Canal treaties in 1978 under Jimmy Carter. So anyway, we got to be really close, and I bought a house 3 blocks away from him.
Yeah.
He posted military guards outside my driveway. Had a long drive, circular drive with gates and so forth, and he posted military guards without my asking for. And when I did ask, he said it was for my protection.
Did you have a view? Not to interrupt, but you must have had this magnificent view. I mean, it's an island, or kind of. It's not really an island, but
my view was more of Panama City, which was a smaller Manhattan.
Yeah.
I often compare Panama City to a little Manhattan. Fabulous restaurants.
Yeah.
Great clubs. Every bank in the world. It was a great place to live. Make great food. I mean, I had always loved Latin American food.
Me too.
And in Panama, it was the best. But I made a lot of friends in Panama with a lot of military people, military intelligence. I had a lot of lavish parties at my house. It was just a good way to expand my sphere of influence. Yeah. And I assisted with the election of Nicholas Barletta, who ran for the presidency in 1984. Flew him down on my private jet, donated money to the campaign. The election was rigged, to the best of my knowledge. And I won't go into the details, it'll take too long.
Yeah.
You can read it in the book. Basically, it was the opposition candidate was within a couple thousand votes of Nicholas Barletta. And I was very concerned, and Noriega saw my concern, and so he invited me to his ranch in Boquete for the weekend. And I took my Aunt Denise, my wife at the time, my girlfriend at the time, whose father was retired Secret Service,
Oh, wow.
by the way.
Great.
Oh, anyway, he writes a nice note for Denise, which I kept, which the feds eventually found. So anyway, things worked out really well. As I discussed in a previous episode, the cartel had set up a lab and it had been seized, and in the Medellin cartel
Right.
at the time, not the Cali cartel, but the Medellin cartel,
The
who
Ochoas.
was the major, they were the major exporters
Right.
of cocaine out of Colombia
Right.
at the time. They were manufacturing tens of thousands of kilos of cocaine. And I got introduced to them, and I resolved a issue for them regarding their Noriega and a contract out on Noriega. And we went into details about this.
Yeah.
And they asked me to assist in their money laundering, and I set up a money laundering operation for them. And they were paying 7% on $50 to $100 million a week.
My goodness.
And I set that up with Noriega, giving him 2 or 3% of the 50 million a week, and me keeping 2%, and me giving Cesar Rodriguez and Enrique Bertel 1% apiece.
So, wait, how much is that? Is that $2 million a week?
Million, it was 3.5 million a week. And Noriega would get $1 million a week or $2 million a week,
Right.
depending on the amount
How much?
of monies that came in on the containers. And it varied, you know. But I was in the middle of America's heartland.
Right.
So, and that was my £1 million importation into Missouri, up the Mississippi River to St. Louis, to Turkey Farm on the Missouri River.
I don't think we ever really went into that last episode, did we?
Oh, and we'll just briefly touch on it.
Yeah.
And people read the book if they want to know more about it. We actually, I had set up, we had bought a tug and barge through one of my Panamanian shell corporations. I had found an offload site on the Missouri River, an old turkey farm. I had paid for a deposit on £1 million of the best marijuana I could find in Colombia from Milligan Nasser. And I was back in the U.S. Finalizing the crews, the offload sites, the truck drivers, the new advanced conveyor systems that I had designed. Spent $300,000 on.
Wow.
Just all the details. And I had Lee Rich fly down to the Cayman Islands because I knew we were hot. I knew we were under surveillance. There were a number of things that gave it away, and I won't go into them, but I knew we were under surveillance, so I had sent Lee back down to the Cayman Islands. I had hangared our personal Learjet and chartered out of Oklahoma City another Learjet that I was using myself. So I had flown back into Tampa to finish packing up my safe house in Tampa for my final move to Panama and to green light to America's Heartland, which the Fed named Master Blaster. And they named it that because they found documents that Lee Rich had led them to by accident, that was the name of the tugboat, the Master Blaster.
Oh, right.
The operation was actually America's Heartland from the beginning because I'm in Missouri.
Right.
You know, America's Heartland.
It is.
I thought it's an appropriate name.
That's so funny. And it's just great. That's a great. I was going to ask you who came up with that name. That's great.
I did.
Yeah.
Most of our apps were named after our our ships.
Right. Right.
This one was my last. I was tired. The money laundering operation and the money I'd already made and the 300 million off America's heartland, it was just, I'd reached the top. There was nothing more for me to do. And as I've said before, once you have money, you want power.
Right.
And I was at the pinnacle of my career and I was looking at power. I was living in a country I had absolutely immunity from anything I wanted to do.
Carte blanche.
I carried diplomatic passports. I lived in a mansion. I had beautiful women around me. I didn't have my family. I did give up things that were dear to me. Couldn't be in a permanent relationship, but I didn't care. I lived in the world of, I was going to die young. So,
how old were you? May I ask, how old do you think you can remember how old you
31.
were? So you're 31 years old. You're worth, and people have to understand when you say you're worth $20 or $30 million today, that's $100 million. So $300 million, and you're talking about a billionaire.
Yeah,
but a billionaire in America, not like Mark Cuban billionaire, a billionaire in a third world country where you actually are own. You're like you said, you have autonomy. You can do anything you want. You're on your head a little bit. Did you remember what your mindset was back then?
No, look, I was happy-go-lucky. I was nonviolent.
Yeah.
I hung out in the best clubs in the best restaurants. Always had a table reserved.
Right.
Always had women, from all over the world, that were just wanting to party. It's 1983 and 1984.
Yeah.
The world is rocking.
I was there. Dom Perignon and cocaine.
We're listening to Michael Jackson, Thriller, and Lionel Richie's all night long.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I danced to that in my favorite nightclub, as I'm snorting rails and drinking Cristal champagne.
Cristal was my favorite. Between Dom Perrier-Jouet, I loved Cristal Rosé. That was my...
Cristal was my favorite.
Yeah, mine too.
It just was.
I just love Cristal.
Oh, we had accumulated...
Rosé was also... That's right, the other one. But no, Cristal had a Rosé too. I liked them both.
And I had a connection for Cristal in Clearwater that I was buying it for $35 a bottle.
Wow. That's good.
By the case. And I was buying 6 cases and loading it on my Learjet and flying it down to Panama. Anyway, so I go back to working America's Heartland, and I'm flying back from Missouri after giving the go-ahead for the offload site, and I fly into Tampa at a different FBO, fixed base of operations where private jets are serviced. And I see our jet on the tarmac, November 39292, our Lear 35A, which should have been in the hangar in Fort Lauderdale.
An executive.
Because I knew whenever it got pulled out of the hangar, the DEA and the task force would be tracking it. So I get in about 1:30 at night, and I see the jet, and of course I'm paranoid, but nobody's there. And I have a Bronco at the airport, so I get out, unload my bags, get to my Bronco, stop at the first payphone I could find, and I call my partner Lee, and I had very unpleasant words for my partner about the Learjet being out of the hangar. And he said, well, he had some girls in the Cayman Islands and he didn't want to bother with flying commercial, and he didn't want to pay for a private charter just down. And I said, Lee, I don't really give a fuck. You've compromised both the jets now. I said, now you meet me at my house tomorrow morning and pick me up, and we're going to drive back to the FBO, and we're going to park away from it, and you're going to send all 4 pilots back to their home destinations, which was Oklahoma and Fort Lauderdale, and I'll charter another jet, my own, and you just stay the fuck out of my way. I said, all you need to worry about is distribution for 25 tractor trailers of pot.
Wow.
Right? The 1,000,000 pounds.
And then, doesn't he know that each jet has a transponder, and that transponder that they can tell when the plane takes off and leaves? I mean,
we know. They're already. It's already flagged with U.S. Customs
just by the tail numbers alone.
By the tail numbers.
Yeah.
So they're watching.
The transponder puts out an electronic signal that's unique to the jet.
Yeah.
So they as soon as they can track that jet through. One time when I was working with Donnie, one of the bales had a transponder in the bale, and we didn't know what it was, and I was tasked to take it out and show it around and figure it out. And when I found out what it was, it kind of flipped everybody out. We didn't know if the Colombians put it in there to keep track of the ship, or if the DEA put it in there to follow the load.
No, that would be a DEA tactic.
Yeah, it was.
Or FBI.
Yeah, it was. I was like 19 to go, kid, we don't know what this is. Take it and see if you can find out what it is. And I had a friend of mine in high school that was a genius electronics. So I took it to him in his garage. He was an albino kid. And he looked at it and goes, oh, this is some sort of radio. He was brilliant. He invented, how you push 1 to talk and, 2 to, all the push button stuff on a phone to go through voicemail and all that. That's the guy who invented it. And out of his garage in Fort Lauderdale. But and when I found out what it was, and then I called like an airline parts, like an airplane, I go, you know what? They go, well, that whole engine. And then I called Sandy Berghoff and Donnie, and they're like, oh shit, get this thing out of here. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So, to make a long story short, Lee picks me up the following morning. We drive back to the FBO. The feds are watching it. I send Lee and another gentleman in to send the pilots home and the jets home. And they don't come out for 15 minutes. So I get out of the Bronco, start to walk away because I know something's up. My mistake was I shouldn't have gone back to the FBO.
Right.
But anyway, I did. I get out of the Bronco. They immediately surround me, arrest me, ask me if I'm Stephen Kalish. Of course, I deny it. I said, no, my name's Frank Brown. Here's my driver's license. They go, no, we know who you are.
Not going to fall for you like the last guys did.
No, they
remember the last story where they held it.
What had happened was...
Well, let me ask you something. Let me interrupt you again, because that's what when you look back over your life and you think about, because I shouldn't have done that. If I just hadn't got out of the Bronco that day, do you ever run that back, at any point? Not today now, it's been too long, but.
No, never
just
did.
The way the cards are dealt, you play the hand. That's what happens. I agree.
So I got arrested under my fugitive warrant out of Texas,
right,
in Galveston, for a 4-year sentence. And that's all they knew, that I was a wanted fugitive out of Texas. They didn't know about any of my smuggling pictures. They knew about Chick Forder's cocaine importation,
right?
Because its guys had rolled over, and that's how they tracked the plane initially. A couple months earlier, Lee had invited Chick Forder to fly with us to the Bahamas for a party weekend, unbeknownst to me. And the feds followed Chick to the airport, to the FBO, and they saw us get on the plane. And when we got back from the Bahamas, flying to Fort Lauderdale exact, where they never fucked with us, the manager of the FBO in Tampa told our pilots that as soon as we left for the Bahamas, the FBI showed up. So we knew the plane was hot. So then that's when we hangared it. Well, what they did was they contacted Fort Lauderdale exec. They got the customs declaration card that you fill out
Yep.
when you're in the U.S. They had it sent up to Tampa, analyzed the prints of Frank William Brown, and they came back to Stephen Kalish.
Ah,
So that's how they matched me up to Frank William Brown. So they arrested me, took me to their task force headquarters in Tampa. And I'm going to make this short, or we'll talk all day. They take me to their task force headquarters, and as I'm entering the main room, it's all whiteboards, right? Across this 60 by 40 foot space with offices surrounding it. And I look at the whiteboards and I see Chick Fortin's name, I see Lee Rich's name, and I see Skip, just Skip, not Frank Brown, just Skip. And they take me in the SAC's office, and SAC stands for Supervisory Agent in Charge. He runs the Tampa office of the FBI and was in charge of the task force at Tampa, investigating Chick Fortin's cocaine importation. So they take me in the office and sit me down, and they tell me I'm in real trouble. And I'm like, okay. What are your questions? Well, are you going to cooperate with us? You got to tell us what's going on. And I go, what do you mean, what's going on? I said, nothing's going on. I said, do you have me on a fugitive warrant from Texas? I said, that's it. And they said, no, don't be coy with us. I said, okay, look, there's nobody sitting in this room right now that has the security clearance to hear my story. I said, no offense. I'm not trying to be insulting or a wise ass, but there's nobody in this room with security clearance. I said, contact the U.S. State Department, have somebody come over, and I'll talk to them. And then we'll go from there. And Jerry, who was the special agent in charge, he lost his cool. Don't get smart with me, Kalish. You don't know what. And I said, look, Jerry Coughlin was his name. I said, Jerry, I've tried to be a gentleman with you. I said, hand me the telephone. I need to call my lawyer. And he goes, no. And I reached for the phone on his desk, and he grabbed my hand, and I said, Jerry, I'm entitled to my phone call. So he let go of my hand. I called my lawyer, Dick DeGuerin, knew his number by heart.
yeah.
It was 713-229-5353. Anyway, so I called him. Secretary recognized my voice. Without me saying a word, I said, look, I need to talk to Dick. Could you please get him on the line? She said, I'll put you right through. So Dick's first words to me are, I knew I'd be hearing from you sooner or later.
Yeah.
I said, well, I'm glad it's been later, but I'm about to be transferred to Hillsborough County Jail. Will you come over and let's talk, see how I can get out of this mess? He goes, I'll be over there as soon as I can. So I hung up the phone, and I said, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. There's a custom agent named Laura Sherman that was there. FBI agent named Stanley Jacobson, who were case agents on my case, and ended up getting married, divorced their wives, married each other. Typical paid place drama.
That's funny.
I saw that coming. During
You saw the sparks at the. That's funny.
Yeah, I knew what was going on. So anyway, they send me to Hillsborough County. Dick DeGuerin flies over. Dick DeGuerin's one of the most prominent defense attorneys in the United States.
And he was in Houston, right? Or Austin?
Houston.
Yeah.
He was just named one of the most influential men in the state of Texas
Wow.
in the past 100 years, just last month.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Still one of my close friends.
Oh, nice.
Him and his wife, both. He wrote the foreword to my book.
Oh, that's right. Again, shameless plug.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. The Last Gentleman Smuggler. So anyway, Dick comes over. He doesn't represent cooperating witnesses. We go to trial, spend 6 weeks in trial. You know, it's a loser.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to jail for life without parole, plus a couple 100 years. So I tell
For the
Dick,
case in Texas, or for they built it all. They got it all.
I went to Texarkana
Yeah.
for 14 months.
Oh,
Was
geez.
doing my time. That's where I meet Bruce Perlman,
Yeah.
Texarkana. Bruce, I'll never forget it. We're in E-Block in Texarkana, which is a medium security prison. So they escort me to my cell, and there's Bruce sitting on the top bunk with a turban, and he's a Sikh at the time.
Yeah.
And I'm going, well, this is interesting. Shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
And I said, you want the top bunk? He goes, yes, I prefer it. I said, that's good. I like the bottom.
Well, I always say
So
the new guy always gets the top bunk, so you're lucky that
Always,
yeah.
always.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm in Texarkana serving my sentence, minding my own business, working in the business office, doing a whole lot of things. And those are all stories that you could read in the Last Gentleman Smuggler.
One more time.
But yes. So anyway, after about 14 months, I'm expecting to be sent to the federal prison camp right outside the FCI, Federal Correctional Institution. So as I go in for my quarterly review, the unit manager and my case manager, they go, well, you've been a model prisoner. We love what you've done for the prison inmates, and you're ready for camp. There's one small little problem. I have a indictment here that I need to give you from Tampa, Florida, for a continuing criminal enterprise out of Tampa, Florida. Plus, there seems to be a question of a 300,000 pound importation into Louisiana that this U.S. attorney from Lafayette is calling about. And that was the 300,000 pounds
Right.
we brought into Abbeville, actually,
Right.
was the place in South Louisiana. So anyway, they refused prison camp. Then they hand me the indictment. So I go back to my bunk. I'm reading the indictment and laughing. I mean, because the last several counts of the indictment were all about what Lee Rich did while I was in prison. Now, when I was arrested, I called Lee Rich from Hillsborough County Jail. And I told him that I had seen his name on a whiteboard, that the feds were on to us, and you better go to the Cayman Islands and lay low, because the shit is about to hit the fan. He didn't do it. Make a long story
What
short.
an idiot.
He didn't do it.
He did too much coke. If you read your book, it's one thing to do coke. It's another thing. You know how coke can take a hold of you. It's not good when you're your boss to be coked out.
Lee was not an addict by any means.
Oh, okay.
Lee was, when he would do coke, he would do a lot of coke in one night.
Yeah. Oh, I got
And
you.
what was left over at 5 a.m.,
He'd throw it
would
off.
flush.
That's what I used to do. I'd blow it
Yeah.
right off the plate.
And then he would get back to work.
Yeah.
I
do
mean,
the same thing.
He was brilliant. He was smart. Operation, not so much operational wise for such large ops, but for schmoozing, people like Doc McGee, who was the manager for Motley Crue, and,
Yep.
John Bon Jovi and others, and raising investment funds, and had a great distribution network from having been in the business for so long.
I mean, you guys were moving.
Yeah.
I don't know how, honestly, I've been in the cannabis space my whole life. I don't know how you guys move so much. It's just hard to believe. I mean, because I don't think, if you bring in 300,000, you got to be taking in 10% of what's coming in that year. I don't think there was 3 million pounds a year coming in. I don't know. Am I crazy?
I don't know. I
know a lot of guys that bring in 200,000, 175,000, but most guys are bringing in.
Most people are bringing in 40 to 50,000.
Exactly what I was just going to say.
They're getting motherships offshore.
Yep.
Loading it on the ship boats and sailboats or whatever.
Yep.
Fast speed boats.
Yep.
And bringing in anywhere from 2,000 to 40,000 pounds at a shot.
I've sat on top of 40,000 pounds before. I've never sat on top of, hold on. I'll tell you what, here it is. Where is it? This used to be my knife. So I'd climb into a room, take out my buck knife, start cutting open the bales. I've had this for about, I don't know how many, 30-something years. And then I would mark my bales and come back with my load cards and take them. That was my buck knife.
Yep. I still have, mine's in the other room.
That's so funny. You and I, we have, other than the size of the operations, you and I are, similar in a lot of ways like that.
Yeah. So anyway, I get arrested. I go to Tampa. I go to trial. I knew it's a loser.
Yeah.
I offer the government a deal. I'll tell them about Noriega. They go, no, we really don't care about Noriega. We just want your assets. So I spent a few months fighting with the government over my assets. And ended up giving them, I don't know, 15 million or something, in gold and cars and homes and other things.
It's all about the Benjamins. It's all about the money.
Oh, yeah. And they don't want to talk about it. They want to know about Noriega, but they don't want to, nobody wants to talk about it.
Good.
It's like the Middle District of Florida is holding me incommunicado in Gilchrist County Jail.
You and I know about Gilchrist.
Yeah, and we talked about it earlier.
Yeah.
Little did they know I was living it up at Gilchrist. And that was part of my jail experience. So I'm up at Gilchrist, and then the U.S. government decides Noriega is no longer an asset. U.S. government comes to me and asks me if I'll testify on national television before the U.S. Senate. And I say yes, under certain conditions, and they meet all my conditions. The book goes into detail about those conditions, and the Marshal Service hated me. I mean, my conditions were private jets and hotel suites and steak dinner, conjugal visits, all the things they did not like to do.
You got big balls. You got big.
Look. Yeah, it was this way. You could ask and be told no.
Right.
Or you could ask and be told yes. 98% of the time, I got a yes. When I got told no,
that's
no big deal.
It just blows me away that, like, I read that in the book, that you're like, yeah, I want a Learjet. I mean, listen, keep you in the style to which you become accustomed. Beautiful women, wonderful hotel rooms, good dinners. Come on. You're Steve effing Kalish, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah, so after my testimony, before the U.S. Senate, they had to send me somewhere. And I said, well, and Bruce had written me from Pleasanton through his sister and said, look, you gotta get out to Pleasanton. It's this wonderful co-ed prison with half men, half women in the foothills of Northern California. So I said, all right, send me to Pleasanton.
You
So they
guys are
send me
resort shopping. You and Bruce are in jail. You're in prison, not jail. And so far, you've been to Gilcrest, which you and I have talked about extensively because we both know the run-ins there, as they say. And then you get, it's crazy. It's crazy, like.
And I mean, Pleasanton was fabulous.
Yeah.
I mean, you got college courses there. I met a lot of women. I wasn't screwing any of them like Bruce was, but
Yeah.
I met a lot of infamous women. And we don't have time to go and fucking name them all.
Yeah.
And I do in some of Bruce's podcasts, but I had a good time. The best part of it was taking college courses. In the evenings, one of the courses was third world politics, taught by I thought, well, this is a perfect course for me.
Yeah.
I've lived in Mexico, I've lived in Panama, I've lived in the Cayman Islands, I've lived in Colombia. I know third world politics.
You got to pass this one.
I even have my paper, my final exam I wrote on third world politics.
How'd you do?
Of course, I got an A for it.
Oh, I was going to say.
Anyway, what?
I hope you got it. I was going to say you got an A+, huh?
Oh, yeah.
The one thing that you exude when we talk, you and I, either in private or on the channel, is, it's obvious you're highly intelligent. Have you ever had anybody do your IQ test?
No, not since I was in middle school.
Yeah, I don't think mine came out so good. My mother, they IQ tested me and my two brothers, and my older brother's a double Ivy League graduate. He just won an award for being recognized as one of the top lawyers in the world. My younger brother, I've said, is one of the top stockbrokers. I'm the middle child. That's all I can say.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think I'm around 120 or something.
You're 170. You're above Einstein.
I had one of the things in my life that made me successful was always surrounding myself with people smarter than I was.
Yep.
Because from those people, I would learn the most.
Right.
And I always listened. I learned to keep my mouth shut and to listen. And I was a sponge for listening.
Yeah.
So when it came to a ship captain, a shrimp boat captain, a pilot, it didn't matter. I always listened and learned. And I was also well-read.
Yeah.
I've always to this day, I'm like a sponge. I mean, read the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and my local newspapers and whatever, not so much right now because I'm adverse to politics due to the fact of the crazy political situation our country's in right now.
Yeah. I agree.
I can only kick so much.
Yeah.
But I was always well read, so I knew what was going on. So my prison experience was co-ed prison, Lafayette Parish prison, which was, ordering shrimp poor boys and having barbecues on the rec yard and, my partner Lee Rich actually getting one of the prison guards pregnant and having a baby with her.
Are you kidding me?
Literally.
He was definitely charming.
Yeah, I mean, I was going by that time. The trial had in Lafayette was over, and I got transferred back to Pleasanton.
Oh, nice.
You know, after Lafayette, they asked me where I wanted to go. I said Pleasanton. And by that time, they were already.
Not to interrupt, but how did they move you around? Because a lot of the guys I know got the diesel tour where they were stuck on a bus, and it sounds like you didn't quite get that same treatment. Did you end up being treated?
Initially, it was prison bus,
Yeah,
Con Air,
right.
and then after I became a cooperating witness against Noriega, it was all private jet.
That's crazy.
Otherwise, I said, fuck you. I'm not going. You fly me private or I'm not going. And of course, that irked the marshals to no end because they'd always have to pick me up in a private jet.
Right.
And so they flew me back to Pleasanton. I pleaded with the processing officer to put me back in the general population at Pleasanton, where there were 750 women and 50 men. And I stayed there several months. And once they phased out all the men, I had no alternative but to join the witness protection program.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You pleaded with them because they wanted to put you in the witness protection program. You wanted to be in the general population where you can go to the movies every night, hang out with all the women, and eat the home cooked food. What Bruce talks
Exactly.
about. Everybody has got to watch Bruce Perlowin's podcast, The King of Pot, as we've talked about, because he goes into detail more with Stephen on some of their stuff that they did together, and also, the prison life in Pleasanton. He's really funny about it.
So when I have to leave Pleasanton, I don't have any alternative. I have about 18 months left on my sentence. No, maybe a little longer. And so I call up the U.S. attorney and I go, look, I said, I can't be back in general population anywhere. And not because I was afraid for anybody, for Noriega or anybody like that. I was afraid of Mexican Mafia, Aryan Brotherhood,
right?
People like that who would be looking for making a name for themselves,
right? Smart,
by killing a high-profile witness like myself.
Yeah.
So I ended up in a witness protection unit outside of Phoenix, being run by U.S. Marshals. My favorite group of people.
Yeah, they love you.
Oh, but for the U.S. Marshals to be running a witness protection unit outside a prison in Phoenix was difficult for the Bureau of Prisons and the Marshal Service to get along.
Yeah, so I was going to say, they're not, I mean, you and I know, I remember telling one of the, and I was only in jail for a short period of time, but befriending one of the guards and going, more than once I said, I'm going to go home eventually. You're stuck being a guard because this is the only industry in your town and you already got a pension, so unless you find something else. And I mean, I said to him, I will get out. And I also, was very, determined to get out. But so here's the marshals now, basically stuck in a fucking jail every day, watching the people that they were chasing. Because people have to understand, the U.S. Marshals, their only job is to chase criminals. They're not a police department.
In the WITSEC unit, which is an abbreviation for Witness Security.
Yeah.
In the WITSEC units, the Marshals' job is to make us happy.
Yeah.
Because we're all cooperating witnesses for very high-profile cases, right? So
that's
while
funny.
I was in this WITSEC unit, Sammy the Bull Gravano was there. It was 70% mafia guys who were rolling over on John Gotti and other mobsters, and 30% coke and marijuana smugglers.
Right.
And we would hang out with our respective groups.
Right. You weren't sitting there with the razor blade shaving the garlic and making the sauce like they show in the movies.
No. But I was working in the kitchen and ordering all the food and having fresh carrot juice every day.
That's great.
And one of the perks of being in WITSEC was you could order from the local health food store in Phoenix, and you could order all you wanted.
It's crazy.
So I ordered all the supplements, all the vitamins, the protein powders, bottled water, and I would just store it in my cell. So I was there awaiting finishing out my sentence while the U.S. government was trying Noriega in Miami.
Right.
And I talked to Pat Sullivan, the AUSA.
Right.
And then there was Dick Gregory, who was a U.S. attorney.
Dick Gregory. Remember that guy.
So Pat Sullivan flies out with his associate then to Phoenix, right? And says, look, I'm going to need your testimony. And I said, Pat, you already assured me I wasn't going to have to testify against Noriega because the charges in Miami have nothing to do with anything I did with Noriega. And he goes, no, I want you to testify about what you did with Noriega because it shows a pattern of behavior.
Really?
So I had to testify pursuant to my plea agreement. I had to testify in Miami.
So you had to get up on stand and look at Noriega in the face and testify against him.
Yeah.
Not an easy thing. Not an easy thing to do.
Oh, no. It was not.
No.
I didn't have any difficulty because I wasn't testifying against any of the things he was on trial for.
What was he on trial for in Miami? For the cocaine smuggling or?
Yeah. And Frank Rubino was his attorney who I knew well.
Yeah.
I mean, really well.
Yeah.
I'd started coke with him. We'd hired him to represent different crew members in other cases of ours.
Right.
And Rubino's mistake was never asking to interview me before I got on the stand.
Right.
If I obviously couldn't send Rubino a note. And if you've ever been in WITSEC in Miami, where they held Noriega for 17 years.
Yep.
It's serious lockdown.
I know. He died in prison, didn't he?
No.
Oh, did
Noriega was 17 years in Miami, 3 years in France for money laundering, and died in Panama under house arrest.
Well, that's where my friend Sabo, the guy I told you that, might have crossed your path, he did 22 years in Miami. 22 years from 95. I don't know when he went in, but he got out because of COVID. So he got out in 2001 or 2002 because of COVID. And he did 22 or 23 years. So he would have been in there with Noriega, I guess, at the same time. I have to ask him.
Yeah, but you're isolated from other prisoners.
Well, he worked with me in the DEA. That's how I met him. He was an undercover DEA informant.
All I'm saying is Miami WITSEC is you're isolated from Noriega wasn't.
I'll tell you something funny. David got to the point where he was running what's it called? Core prison. It's the prison company. Core.
Prison Core. Yeah.
Yeah. He was the head guy. Yeah. He told me he had an office. They bring in food every day. The guards, he would cook it. He goes, I ran the entire thing. I told him, I said, David, don't do that. They're never going to let you out of jail. I go, they got $180,000 a year guy for 23 cents a day or $1 a day. And finally they let him out because he was older and COVID, and he got extradited back to Europe. He had set that up because he was a dual citizen that he wanted to get extradited because they knew in Europe. They said to him when he got to Europe, they go, the prison guards in Europe, the prison officials looked at him and go, we've never seen anybody that did 22 years. They don't do that in Europe. They don't give people 20 life sentences. And
No.
he told me there had never seen anybody that did 22 years. The warden pulled him in when he did the transfer.
Yeah, unfortunate. 22 years is much too long.
Yeah.
I served 8.5. I got 6 months halfway house and started my life over. I don't know how much longer you want to go.
We can end it here, and we can pick it up one more time to talk about the future of your life. Or you're the guest.
Why don't we end it here? This is when I get out of prison. While I was, look, I had said this in the past, and I'll say it again. The people that suffer the most while you're in prison are your family and loved ones, and your friends. While I was in Woodstock and Phoenix, my mother was dying of cancer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I called up the FBI. The marshals wouldn't give me a visit. So I called up the FBI. The FBI got a release, a writ from federal judge, and released me into their custody. And they flew me on a private jet to Lakeway outside of Austin. It took me to my parents' house in Spicewood, Texas. And my mother had cooked a big meal, and my brothers came over, my sister, my family, and we had a big meal and, drank some wine. I shared with them my experiences, and I knew it was the last time I'd see my mother. And I said my goodbyes.
I have to say that the journey of life, we'll talk about this in the next show, the pains and of all the stuff that we all go through making these decisions. But I have to 100% agree with you. Even it really took me till not a couple months ago, I kid you not, where I realized my mother has passed and my brothers have put up with my shenanigans, having to deal with me writing from jail and begging for money when I needed my younger brothers visited me in the jails I was, when I got arrested twice. And I don't know how I could be so insensitive to never have told my mother, Mom, I'm sorry. But the fact that you got a chance, everything you did to parlay, we both parlay. We make a deal. We're going to give you this if you give me that, right? I worked for the DEA for 2 years. I did 14 cases. I got probation. I didn't know I was going to get probation. I was hoping I got less than 10 years. I was looking at 25. So we make those trades. And as your friend and as somebody that's been through this, the ability to go back and see your mother was a gift. And when people say
my brothers,
your family, and when people say, "Oh, well, you were a rat or you were a snitch," and I never ratted out any of my friends. I just worked for the DEA as an operative. But we know that you're not protecting the salt of the earth. Like, in other words, one day the guy that people think that you turned on is going to turn on you, because when the government gets a hold of you, they know what they're doing. It's our ball. It's our game.
There is not a single person I testified against in Lafayette, Louisiana, that I did not personally plead with to cooperate with the government, or at least plead guilty to their charges.
You said that.
And they're all my friends. Nobody holds any grudges. Some of my best friends to this day, I testified against in Lafayette.
Right. Because we all understand the game. We get it.
Noriega wrote a book. He definitely was upset with Jose Blandon and Carlton Caceres and a lot of others who lied about him on the stand, but didn't have a single thing to say about me.
Right.
Because I told the truth.
Right. And the truth will set you free. The truth will set you free. Well, guys, that's another show with Steve. We have one more coming. The next show is going to be called Redemption, and we're both going to go over, our lives and our pains and our sufferings. Obviously, Steve's here to tell us his story. I'm going to remind everybody
Yeah.
one more time.
What do you do? What do you do after prison?
Right. And your stories are amazing. And as I say, the cream rises to the top one more time. You got to watch the last show, because what this man does after he gets out of prison morphs everything he did in his drug dealing days. It's crazy. And I'm glad to be able to call him a friend and to have our friend Steve Kalish on the show tonight. Steve, thank you so much. For those of you who don't know, we're of a time difference because Steve's on his private little piece of land in Hawaii. So, life turned out to be all right. And again, I just want everybody to stay tuned. The next show is going to be Redemption. Thank you so much, Steve, for coming tonight.
And it's always a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, it is. What you don't know is we have our little side conversations when the camera's off, and we tell the little stories about some of the stuff we went through. So we really get each other. Stay with us. We're going to end this show now. And Steve, you know what I have to do? I have to lock you in for a couple minutes.
Absolutely. And I'll see you soon.